Hi, this is Brian Venton again from Townsville, North Queensland. This is part 3 of my series on Australia Divided or Australia United, where I propose an alternative model of Australian governance. If what I've identified in my previous videos are correct in the way our nation is divided, and if my suggestion of a constitutional referendum is acceptable, then what kind of alternative governance structure could work for us? This model is quite different. The first tier of government would create a lower house, that is, a House of Reps that is genuinely representative rather than partisan. Currently there are 151 federal electorates, and in this model that would be increased probably to around 200. This lower house would not be party aligned in any way, and I'm advocating that we abolish political parties. Elected representatives would have primary allegiance to their electors, not a party, and be directly accountable back to their electorate. They would not be pre-selected by any process, nor would they represent any corporation or special interests. They would be truly independent. Then a Prime Minister would be appointed by popular vote by those elected representatives to be a spokesperson on behalf of the Parliament, not a spokesman on behalf of a party. Representatives would be elected by absolute majority and serve 3-year terms, but with a maximum 3-term limit. There'd be no parties, no voting blocks in this governing structure, and this system has the potential to be genuinely representative in the legislative discussion debate process. It makes representatives more directly accountable to their electorate for any political outcomes. It forces them to be across the national debate on any legislation and would encourage voters to engage the national political process via their representatives. Now, the second tier in this model is very different. It would comprise what I call a National Federation of Local Councils. Now, this is new because at the moment councils are not a recognised part of our Commonwealth Constitution. There are currently about 500 odd councils Australia-wide. Around 55% of them are located in regional, rural or remote areas, about 25% urban and urban fringe, and another 20% are in the city-based urban regions. I suggest that we reduce the number of councils to match federal electorate sizes of around 120,000 voters, essentially one local council per electorate. Now, this change would do two things. First, it would dispense with the need of state and territory governments. Now, that's been discussed in other forums, but most of what state governments now do could be done either federally or regionally. But secondly, and this is important, it would mean that every local council would be on an equal voting footing right out to the regions. No one council would be advantaged more than another, whether they're city-based or regional-based. It would mean less councils but more federal electorates. Now, each council will be made up of independent, non-partisan councillors who, like their federal counterparts, would be elected by absolute majority. The election of federal MPs and local councillors by absolute majority would create a whole new level of political engagement and accountability back to the grassroots, bringing federal politics right back to individual communities. Now, the third tier of government would comprise the existing Upper House Senate. Now, the fundamental difference in this model is that senators would function as fully independent representatives of each state rather than have any partisan alignment whatsoever. Senators would be elected, and this is different, on a below-the-line basis by simple majority, thus dispensing with any quotas. All above-the-line voting in this model would be abolished. In our current Senate voting system, and you will be aware of this, it's virtually impossible for any Senate candidates, either aligned or as independents, to get elected from his personal below-the-line vote, simply because they can't achieve a quota in their own right. It is one of the major deficiencies of the current proportional Senate voting system, which always ends up being partisan in nature. Changing to this new model would make it fairer for any person to get elected as a senator in any state by simple majority. Their responsibilities would be similar to what they are now, but with no aligned affiliations. Senators would be elected to serve for 6-year terms, like now, but with a 2-term limit. Now, the fourth tier of government would be the judicial arm. It functions much like it does now, with a key difference that judges would be appointed to office by a board of federal representatives, not appointed by a particular party. They would be appointed to serve for 6 years, but eligible, like they are now, for unlimited tenure, but by review. Now, the fifth tier of government is the administrative arm. It would be similar to our existing federal bureaucracy, but A key difference is that it would be accountable to the parliamentary representatives rather than to a governing party in any election cycle. Now, the sixth tier of government is quite different. It involves the establishment of a national policing service. It would have both a federal component plus a system of local council deputies rather than state policing. The National Policing Service would be administratively accountable to an elected board from the federal parliament and have national jurisdiction in cooperation with local regional deputies. All deputies would be ceremoniously appointed by local councils to serve citizens and uphold the Constitution without fear or favour in their local electoral areas. Local councils would have legislative power to make law enforceable by the deputies in their local precinct. And this is very different because it would make policing relevant to local needs in all different settings. This system of 6 tiers of governance, I think, would encourage the election of representative persons on the basis of not only their recognised abilities, but importantly their acknowledged service to the community. This constitution would include a new preamble acknowledging shared histories, plus a Bill of Rights. For example, the right to freedom of speech and religious expression, the right to citizen-initiated referenda, the right to travel across and within all borders, the right to medical autonomy and unimpeded doctor-patient relationships, the right to national sovereignty against all interference from foreign entities, and so on. Now, there's a lot more that we could talk about in this model, but this is a start for discussion. Now, could a system of governance like this be implemented? What do you think? Yes, it is a radical shift of thinking, but it's not unreasonable nor unworkable. Would there be sufficient goodwill to let go of something that has known deficiencies in order to start something new that could work for us very differently? A new constitution that values all people as equals. A constitution that puts the pain of the past to rest in order to embrace the prospect of a new future without prejudice. I suggest this model would go a long way to resolve much of the division in our country. Division that is both historical in nature and also contemporary in circumstance, and give us the kind of constitution that we so desperately need. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think. Bye.